Welcome back to another episode, all. Throughout this episode, I'm going to discuss self-diagnosis, why everyone suddenly thinks that they are autistic, and why people are thinking that it's all over, and what is it exactly that's bad about self-diagnosis. Let's start. The reason why everyone seems to suddenly think that everyone's autistic, where I keep seeing videos titled things like, why is everyone suddenly neurodivergent? Why is everyone suddenly autistic? And so on. The purpose behind this is simply location. For example, during my first 6 years at school, I was in mainstream school, and I was the only autistic person there. And by being the only autistic person there, that must mean less than 1% of people at mainstream school were autistic. But when I got to year 8, I was transferred from mainstream school to a special education school. And what we came to see there is approximately 80% of people were autistic. So does that mean that all of a sudden it went from the world was 1% autistic to about 80% of the world are autistic? No, it simply means that we're in a location where there's more autistic people. See that people are basing this claim that everyone's autistic all of a sudden based upon their time on Twitter, YouTube, and social media. Well, basically, you are going to find more autistic people on social media because it's a much more suitable place that we find easier to communicate. On social media, they can type, and other people can understand language. On social media, they don't have to make that eye contact that people are demanding. On, say, where people like to be with other people who they are more related to, it's easier for autistic people to find other autistic people online. So on the internet, you're going to find more autistic people there than actually out in the real world. If you go out in the real world, you're not going to find as many. But you'll find far more online. So if you're going to base your judgment on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook groups, you're going to find a lot more people saying they are autistic altogether. And actually some benefits in this. And so, because by being on YouTube, quite a lot of the symptoms seem to just vanish. They are no longer obstacles, like, say, the overwhelming anxiety, for example. The autistic individual, they can be in a location that they're comfortable, so they're not anxious in that location, and we can still communicate with the friends. They're having friends online. So that's another obstacle out the way. Most obstacles autistic people experience, most challenges in communication can be removed and overcome just by communicating online. So you'll find a lot more autistic people online than offline. And if you think about non-autistic people like to socialise more, right? So while autistic people will be online, a lot of non-autistic people will be out at nightclubs, having a drink at the bar and so on. So you're not going to find as many non-autistic people on the internet. So if you're basing your judgment all on the internet, what you see there, you'll see a lot more autistic people there. Now, onto the part of how YouTube works. If you look up videos to do with autism, you're going to find a lot of autistic people, both as narrators and in the comment section. So, of course, they're going to say, I'm autistic, because they are. They actually are autistic. So, why? Because they want to increase the awareness of autism, They want to correct so many of the misconceptions, the myths. They want to meet together with other autistic people. And they're not disregarding what is currently called ASD3, what some people refer to as severe autism, because there's actually no such thing as severe autism or mild autism. And that's why I go about level 1, 2 and 3 now. The levels are simply support needs. It indicates how much support a person needs. Because autism is neurodevelopmental, the part developmental should tell you it develops. So it's not static. It's not you get given ASD3, then you stay as ASD3 for the rest of your life. It might fluctuate across to level 2. Then it might develop back to level 3, then develop to level 1 as the individual goes throughout their life. So autism is not a static disability. Now, when we talk about self-diagnosis, there's several reasons why people should self-diagnose, and so many benefits to it. One of the benefits would be that our problem is actually our health systems. Our health systems are very short-staffed, that even if someone wants an official assessment, they have a waiting list for about 4 or 5 years long. And can they afford to wait that long? The second part is you get charged thousands of dollars. How many people can afford to pay those thousands of dollars for an official diagnosis? Another part is if they actually do a self-diagnosis first, that can help them decide on the probability that they'll receive a diagnosis or not. Because if they're not going to be diagnosed as autistic, what's the point in going in that waiting line? So people might as well find out the probability of actually coming off as autistic. And the third part is that no one gets harmed in the process of a self-diagnosis, but what does go on is they learn more about themselves. And as someone learns more about themselves, it's actually healthier. And then when it helps them able to relate to people who have more related experiences, so it actually increases the quality of life. I can assure you that people are not doing all this self-diagnosis for attention seeking or anything like that. There might be the odd few, and we acknowledge that some people who self-diagnose, maybe they're going to be wrong at times, but as I've already said, no one gets hurt in the process. Fourth is those who actually go through a self-diagnosis and are not officially diagnosed, they don't go taken away from everyone for support services. Because in order for someone to receive support services, any benefits from the benefit system, or any other kind of support that those with ASD3 receive, they're not entitled to support services unless they can actually provide proof that they are autistic. But a self-diagnosis is not proof. So being self-diagnosed doesn't take away support services from those who actually are diagnosed. It just helps them learn more about themselves. And they should be entitled to do that. So those who don't have an official diagnosis but claim they are autistic, they should be entitled to do that. If you just allow me to turn to my laptop to read a story out of someone who is self-diagnosed, but this person seemed very cautious and uncomfortable with a self-diagnosis. I'll connect the link to this story inside the description. I quote, "First, let's get the steaming irony off the table. I really don't have any right to be acting as though my brain has expanded far beyond my friend's current anxieties. He is literally me, less than 6 months ago. My acceptance of my own autistic self-diagnosis is incredibly recent, and I'm still learning about myself and figuring out what finally letting myself use that label means for me. And back when I was still questioning myself, not at all long ago, I was having the exact same fears that my friend is now. Well, plus one other fear, specific to my personal situation. I have ADHD, the symptoms of which often overlap with autism. How do I know everything about me that seems like it might be on the spectrum isn't just my ADHD? I've only moved past those fears through aggressively telling myself that no, there are good reasons to believe in my own judgment on this issue. I need to trust my own knowledge of myself. I shouldn't be afraid to accept a label that not only fits me and my experiences, but actually helps me to better understand and explain myself. At the end of the day, that's the true point of labels. End of quote. So this individual who's self-diagnosed, I like the point she points out right at the end, is that the point of labels, that's the exact point to help us understand ourselves and who we are. That is the true point of labels. Like, isn't that why non-disabled people have the label non-disabled? Isn't it why those who don't see anything wrong with yourselves don't view yourselves as someone with a disorder? So just by adopting a label, it's just a label. That's all. So it's just something to describe themselves. If you go on autism communities online, you'll find that they're not using it just as an excuse for behaviour. There may be the odd ones who use autism as an excuse, but most of them don't do it for attention seeking. They do it, as this individual just said, because they want a better understanding of themselves. Now, back onto the part of why people are suddenly believing everyone's autistic. That's where the individual mentioned that her experience, one of her fears was, how does she know that all these autism-like experiences is not just more about ADHD? How does she know it's not ADHD but is autism? That she gave herself a self-diagnosis. This once again comes all the way back to the money and the fallacy of the diagnostic criteria, of how unscientific it is, and autism research, where she mentioned overlapping symptoms. That's because as time's gone by and they've wanted to make more money, they've just slotted more and more distinct disabilities under autism spectrum disorder. ADHD is often even classified as autism. There's just so many now. As intellectual disability rates have gone down, autism rates has gone further up. So each time a psychiatrist or psychologist diagnoses someone who's just got intellectual disability but not autism, what they'll do is, rather than giving a diagnosis of intellectual disability, they'll give a diagnosis of autism. And then there's sensory processing disorder, but rather than giving the individual the distinct sensory processing disorder, they give them an autism diagnosis. Just so many disabilities, disorders and so on, comorbidities, have all been put under the label autism, but the term autism is now meaningless. It doesn't really mean anything because it's got no distinct difference from all other disabilities. When someone says, I'm autistic, what exactly are they saying about themselves? Do they mean I'm intellectually disabled? Do they mean I've got sensory issues? What do they mean when they say they're autistic? So it's become meaningless because of autism research. Now I'd just like to talk a bit about the romanticization that I keep seeing going on. There is no romanticization going on. All the romanticization was done in the 19th and early 20th century by Francis Galton and those who believed in his doctrine. What they did was they romanticized normal. But what is normal anywhere? But they've romanticized normal and demonized all disabled people, or people who they see as socially undesirable, such as, why did the Germans, for example, classify dark skin as an official disease? Why did they classify females as intellectually inferior compared to men? Why classify left-handedness as pathological? Why claim that homosexuality is pathological? Where did all these come from? Exactly. Well, not pathology itself. It came because society saw it as socially undesirable. I'll just give you all a little task. If you look at the DSM system, actually look inside of it, turn the language into casual day-to-day language. Read it out to a friend, then ask your friend, do you know anyone like that? And they'll know several people like that, and do it with multiple disorders, and you'll find that you can diagnose them with several disorders. Because really the DSM system is just the diagnostic criteria to be diagnosed as a human. They are literally just descriptions of people, all the diagnostic criteria, such as where it says autistic people stim. All humans stim. All of us. So where they don't like change. You know, they like things to remain consistent. Well, lots of humans do. Not just autistic people. There's a lot of people who don't like change. You can look at each thing inside of it. Like, say, obsessive interests. Well, perfectionists, people like businessmen, they're absolutely, fixated and have some obsessive interest in their business. So, basically, all of them inside the DSM are just descriptions of humans. There's actually no connection to the physiology. So how do I know that I'm definitively autistic? They haven't done the kind of brain scans on me to find out, do I have these neurological differences? I don't have gut problems, but they're under the theory autism has something to do with gut problems, the gut-brain axis. The idea that it's something to do with inflammation. But in the diagnostic process that psychiatrists do, and psychologists, none of this physiology is included. They don't go doing brain scans on the patients, or anything. So how does the DSM, how do psychologists and psychiatrists actually know that their patient is definitively whichever disorder they're diagnosing them with? Precisely, they don't know. There's no definitive evidence that someone's autistic, just by the diagnostic statistical manual itself. And that's why someone called Bruce Perry, who runs a clinic himself, he doesn't use the DSM. If you just give me a moment to get something. At the moment, we're on the DSM-5, the 5th edition, ending with TR. If you just allow me to look something up. Because the people who were behind the DSM-4, but they said this was going to be terrifying, that all this all together, that there was no need to bring out the DSM-5. This one's called Dr. Alan Francis, chair of the DSM-4 committee. I quote, DSM-5 will radically and recklessly expand the boundaries of psychiatry. There is no reason to believe that DSM-5 is safe or scientifically sound. End of quote. So, like what I just mentioned, expanded psychiatry. Might this explain to you why more and more people are getting diagnosed? Because the DSM-5 expanded it. There's now over 300 disorders in the DSM. And they are all just descriptions of people. The next one, Dr. Stephen Hyman, former NIMH director. I quote, DSM is totally wrong, an absolute scientific nightmare. End of quote. It actually is a scientific nightmare because it's based on culture. There's autistic individuals who have been to several clinics. If the clinic was in their own culture and so on, where one thing is seen as normal, they kept getting said, no, you're not autistic. But when they went to a clinic in a different culture, apparently the psychiatrist there said, yes, you are autistic. So that shows that it's based on culture, the diagnosis. It's not actually based on the physiology, as Dr. Bruce Perry said, where you can listen to me quote it on a previous video about neurodiversity going mainstream. The next one, Dr. Thomas Insel, another former NIMH director. I quote, patients deserve better. The weakness is its lack of validity. End of quote. I would say yes, it certainly does lack validity, just by no physiological roots connected to the criteria, and by multiplying it to over 300. Because there shouldn't be as many as that within just 60 years. Now, the last one, I quote, there is no definition of a mental disorder. I mean, you just can't define it. It's bullshit. Dr. Alan Francis, chair of DSM-4 committee. End of quote. And I would say that's right, and something which is giving neurodiversity the higher ground. Because you can't define disorder, mental disorder, if you can't define mental order. You can only define one if you know the other. So, altogether they saw that it was going to expand, and more people get diagnosed. And here's why they wanted to expand it. For money. The more people they can medicalise, the more people they can diagnose, the more interventions they can sell, the more drugs they can sell, the more pharmaceutical approaches they can sell, the more funding for research they can gain. They can just get more and more money like Big Pharma and so on. The expansion of it is all about the money. If you go to a GP and report that you're greatly worrying about something, that you've got anxiety, they'll look at the DSM and that will fit the diagnostic criteria of an anxiety disorder, that they'll prescribe you drugs for it, and they'll diagnose you with an anxiety disorder, confusing it with just general anxiety. The same with depression, they'll say you've got major depression disorder, then prescribe to you antidepressants, then what have you got to do? You've got to purchase them. So they're just trying to label more and more people disordered in order for them to be able to sell more drugs, to be able to sell more interventions. If you look online, Autism Investor Summit, you'll find that every single April, private equities, applied behaviour analysis, Autism Speaks, other charities, other stakeholders, and so on, gather together and they have discussions about what are the best business decisions to make the biggest profit out of autistic people. This is something Professor Alicia Broderick called the Autism Industrial Complex. I would recommend reading her book because she shows and exposes so much of how it's all perfectly orchestrated, of how she shows that it was all plotted. Like, say when they claim that autism is an epidemic, there's no such thing as a genetic epidemic. But this myth was begun by Autism Speaks, and she shows you the exact history of when they began that, and then by what Autism Speaks has written on their own website, only reinforces further what Professor Alicia Broderick and her team, their co-workers, have to say. That autism can only be understood within capitalism. That they're just diagnosing more people so they can sell more. So, by going by self-diagnosis instead of a clinical diagnosis, the clinicians can't sell as many interventions, so they don't get as many money. They don't get to do commodification as much through a self-diagnosis. And then, what use is the diagnosis anywhere? Is a lot of people ask. Because as when they claim so many critics of neurodiversity go claim people like myself don't need support, well, if we don't need support, what's the point of a diagnosis? If we don't need any support services, if we don't need to prove to anyone we're autistic, what's the point of a diagnosis? Precisely, there is no point. So why do they still diagnose people who don't need support? Clearly it's the money that they're after. So a self-diagnosis actually has many benefits, so many, rather than cons all the time. I can assure you people are not doing it for attention seeking. I can assure you there's not as many autistic people as you're assuming. If you're watching these videos, why is everyone suddenly neurodivergent? This one of the problems I see on YouTube at the minute is creators seem to be copying each other. Someone comes up with the idea of, say, oh, why is everyone suddenly neurodivergent? When other creators copy that idea. They go looking in the analytics, oh, which video got most views? And then they'll do a video about that topic themselves, even if their channel's got nothing about that topic. So they seem to be looking for what's most popular, and when we do a video about that, and by more people watching that, those with millions of subscribers, they've just preached out to millions of people a lie. It's not everyone's claiming they're autistic, it's just people on the internet, but more of them on the internet are autistic, rather than more of them who are out in the world. They're not online romanticizing autism, but they're basically saying to everyone, we are not monsters, we are humans worthy of dignity and equality. We are not inferior. We are simply people with different needs. Not more needs, but different ones. And so that's basically what they are saying. They're saying, we are entitled to humanity. We deserve to be treated as humans. We should not keep being treated like demons who need to be eradicated. We should be treated as humans. We should be allowed to be who we are without getting ostracised. And it's the same with feminism. The females will claim, we're not inferior. But that once again came from eugenics by Francis Galton, the female inferiority doctrine. All the homophobic behaviour coming once again from Francis Galton and eugenics. The eugenics movement was just about demonising, and the neurodiversity movement is about undoing that. It's about reversing it and claiming, no, we are not demons. So perhaps if people stopped romanticising normality, stopped romanticising thinking humans are just statistics, and actually acknowledge that humans are more than numbers. Notice that in science, humanity has been removed from the picture. They don't actually include the subject of humanity anymore. It's just numbers. And that's the great flaw that I see about any subject in science project trying to learn about humans. Because humanity has been removed from the picture. Such as the diagnostic criteria doesn't look at causation. Why is the individual behaving that way? For example, say, with ADHD as the individual mentioned, that's mainly diagnosed through a short attention span. But there's lots of reasons why someone might have an attention problem. There's hundreds of physiological roots. But it's not diagnosed through identifying physiological roots. So what if it's not ADHD, but it's actually something else? So the DSM is ridiculous. And that's why more people are getting diagnosed. Because it's plain invalid, as the NIMH said. It's a scientific nightmare. It's all about capitalism, making more money. It's not about actually understanding humans. So there's no romanticizing going on. Self-diagnosis can be beneficial in so many ways. There's so much capitalism and money making going on, so much commodification. There's so many groups having investor summits every year in order to decide how to make the biggest profit. And I'm sure we all know by now that just about everything's about making money in our world today. That's just the way our world is working. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. If you would like to hear more, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.